Hey guys, tonight we're heading into Paris, nobody warned you about. A city where everyone looks brilliant, works for peanuts, and somehow thinks they're immortal. Painters weren't just mixing pigments, they were mixing whatever kept the lights on. Poets cried in cafés like it was a competitive sport. And your local pharmacist? He'd casually hand you a bottle of liquid divinity and call it medicine. Sure, you tell yourself it's for the cough, but by midnight, you're in a smoke-choked jazz club watching a trumpet player ascend to heaven on half a dose and questionable ventilation. And the wildest part? Somewhere between the applause and the blackout, you realize this is what progress used to look like, a relapse wearing pearls and pretending it's culture. Before we go deeper into this forgotten little corner of history, do me a solid, tap that new hype button YouTube added. It actually helps channels like mine survive the algorithm jungle. And only subscribe if you really vibe with this strange, quiet storytelling we do here. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is over there. It's always comforting to know who else is drifting off with us tonight. Now settle in. Let the weight of the day slip off your shoulders as we drift together into those quiet, half-forgotten corners of the past. The pharmacist is slicing lemons again. It has nothing to do with medicine, yet he performs the task each morning with the kind of precision people usually save for an operating table. He arranges the slices along the counter like bright yellow punctuation marks, as if he's trying to tidy up the air itself. Behind him, rows of green glass bottles stand in silent formation, their handwritten labels promising remedies for ailments no one can pronounce anymore: neurasthenia, melancholia, the vapors. There's even one bottle labeled simply, Tuesday. You've come here because of a cough, or something that only resembles a cough. It started last week as a tiny scratch in your throat and has since transformed into a faint dissatisfaction with existence that expresses itself mostly through sighs. You explain all this to the pharmacist in a quiet voice, bracing yourself for ridicule, or at best, polite disinterest. But instead, he nods with the gravity of someone hearing a universal truth, then slips into the back room without saying a word. When he returns, he's carrying a small amber bottle, its mouth sealed with wax and tied off with string. The label reads Uni in bold, confident lettering, followed by a list of promised virtues. Clears the chest, calms the nerves, lifts the spirit. And beneath that, in fine print, a modern scientific solution from the laboratories of Bayer. You ask him, what's in it? He gives a faint, knowing smile and says, peace in syrup form. You're told to take 1 spoonful with tea or straight if your dissatisfaction runs deeper. Possible side effects: a touch of euphoria, sudden clarity, and a gentle loosening of your grip on your own personal history. You thank him, hand over 2 francs, and step back into the soft gray Paris morning, holding something that feels suspiciously like a talisman. You try it on the corner of Rue des Arts, beneath a gas lamp that keeps flickering as if debating with the daylight. The liquid is smooth and strangely floral, like sipping a poem that never made it to paper. Warmth spreads through your limbs, both intimate and detached at the same time. You release one long breath and realize the ache in your bones has gone silent. Even the traffic suddenly sounds less hostile. The buildings seem far less judgmental now. By the time you turn onto the next street, your shoes have stopped pinching, and you move with the ease of someone who has suddenly remembered their purpose, even if you're not entirely sure what that purpose is yet. A woman passes by, walking a small dog with a ribbon tied neatly in its fur. The dog studies you with the solemn curiosity of a creature sensing something faintly divine in the way you carry yourself. You acknowledge it with a respectful nod. Back in your apartment, you sit at your desk and start writing a letter meant for no one in particular. The pen moves as if it has its own confession to deliver. Words pour out of you, soft, vulnerable, a little embarrassing, and you let them come. The bottle sits beside your ink pot like a quiet, loyal companion. When the sun begins to warm the windowsill, you remember you had a cough and that it no longer seems important. The following day, you return, not because the bottle is empty, but because it's not. You want another. The pharmacist doesn't ask why. He simply offers a slightly larger bottle, this one with a gold seal. For persistence, he says he has begun slicing oranges. Now the shop smells of citrus and something deeper, something just shy of meaning. Soon you learn that the syrup is not just for coughs. Writers say it gives them rhythm. Painters say it silences the noise between colors. One man swears it cured his fear of umbrellas. Another says it makes him forgive his father. At a small cafe, a woman slips a drop into her champagne and begins speaking German with perfect fluency, despite never having learned it. No one questions this. It becomes part of the weather, unspoken, sticky, necessary. Conversations begin to slow. Eyelids take longer to close. Laughter arrives on delay, softer and more sincere. You see a man at the opera, humming through the overture with tears in his eyes, a bottle peeking from his coat pocket like a secret well kept. You feel like you are part of something, even if you're unsure what it is. A citywide breath held, waiting for a note that never comes. You keep the bottle closed now, not because you need it, but because it understands you. At least that's what you tell yourself. The pharmacist no longer slices fruit, he just watches the door, and you suspect he knows everyone by their coughs and none by their names. The poster says it cures cough, melancholy, nervous conditions, and the unbearable weight of being awake. A syrup from Germany, refined in Switzerland, praised by doctors with mustaches you could ski off. The pharmacy smells like camphor and lemon oil, but somewhere under it all is something sweeter and more dangerous, like a secret wrapped in velvet. You point at the bottle in the window, the one with the label written in a font too beautiful to lie. Heroin. The pharmacist, a man with eyebrows that deserve their and own postal codes, nods solemnly and removes it from the display like it's a relic. He wraps it in brown paper, careful and reverent, and places it in your hand as if it might solve something. You pay with coins that feel too heavy, and the door chimes behind you like it's proud of your purchase. You don't wait. You slip into the alley beside the flower stall and unwrap the bottle like it's contraband or communion. The cork gives a soft sigh as it opens. The smell is delicate, medicinal, and just slightly wrong, like almonds, honey, and forgetting. You tip a spoonful into your mouth. It coats your tongue with warmth and ends with a cool shimmer behind your eyes like a breeze in a locked room. Something changes almost immediately. The ache in your chest quiets. The background hum of the city tram screeching. Shoes slapping stone. Someone shouting about onions fades into a kind of soft music. You breathe, and the breath feels complete, like it reaches corners of your lungs, usually reserved for memory. You laugh once quietly because you finally understand why Parisians never rush. The first time is soft, gentle, a smoothing of the wrinkles in your thoughts. The second time is for curiosity. You take it with tea, just as the pharmacist suggested, and spend the next hour staring at your own hand like it's reciting poetry. Your skin looks radiant. Your nails appear philosophical. You wave at your reflection in the cafe window. It waves back with improved posture. By the third time, it feels like the city has noticed. The waiter is friendlier. The pigeons nod when they pass. The accordion player outside your apartment plays your favorite song before you even think to hum it. You walk down rude as abscesses and the world opens for you. Storefronts blooming with color, strangers smiling with their whole faces. Even the postman flirts. You hear others talk about it too, in the way people talk about good wine or sudden love. It steadies the nerves, says one woman with a fox stole and a laugh that could shatter windows. It improves my chess, claims a man who's never won a match. At a poetry reading, a young man recites an ode to the spoon and weeps halfway through, not from sorrow, but from clarity. The applause lasts longer than the poem. It's not just you, not anymore. There's a new hush in the salons, a soft gleam in the eyes of musicians, journalists, florists, priests. The city leans forward as if in prayer, and you realize everyone is sipping the same syrup, some from glasses, some from teaspoons, some directly from the bottle, with the desperation of confession. No one calls it an addiction. Not yet. They call it innovation. They call it progress. They call it Tuesday. You begin carrying it with you, just a little in your coat pocket, nestled next to a half-used notebook and a pencil you've started calling Lucky. You take it before parties, before letters, before decisions. You take it before sleep and then again when you wake. It is always the right time. It tastes the same every time, and every time it feels new. The cough never returns. Not really, though. Sometimes you think you can hear it faintly behind laughter or at the bottom of a wine glass, But it doesn't matter, because you know what to do. You pour a spoonful, tip it back, and let the world come gently into focus. Not brighter, not louder, just better. And for now, better is more than enough. In Elberfeld, the glass windows of the Bayer laboratory shine like they've never heard of consequence. Inside, the air is crisp with order, and the men wear white coats as if they've married science and are trying to keep it clean. One of them, Dr. Hinrich Dreser, stands before a flask of amber liquid, looking as proud as a man who's just named a planet after himself. He believes he has outsmarted suffering. He believes he has disciplined morphine into something polite. The substance is smooth, white, and odorless. It dissolves on the tongue like snow that's forgotten to be cold. In the marketing copy, they call it heroic, a champion against cough, pain, worry, and most forms of emotional inconvenience. A newspaper ad in Berlin reads, "Heroin safe for children." A mother smiles as she measures out a spoonful beside a cheerful cartoon child in a bow tie. The child's eyes are wide and suspiciously serene. You imagine Hinrich standing straight back beside his invention, explaining calmly that this version has none of morphine's difficulties. It is, he says, non-addictive. He says this with a certainty only possible in laboratories or fairy tales. His assistant sneezes once, accidentally inhales a particle, and spends the rest of the afternoon writing poetry in the corner about clouds that feel like family. When the product reaches Paris, it arrives in satin-lined crates. Apothecaries marvel at its purity. Doctors embrace it like an overdue letter from reason. The upper class prefer it over the basin, which is messy and loud. This is clean, modern, efficient. It doesn't wobble, it glides, and it makes everything taste like it was meant to be eaten. At a salon near the Champs, Elise, a man in a velvet waistcoat, dissolves a pinch into his champagne and proceeds to monologue for 23 minutes about the soul of steam engines. His friends listen rapt, not because they care, but because their own spoons have recently delivered serenity, and now everything, even nonsense, is beautiful. A woman knits a scarf and forgets halfway through what it was for. She keeps knitting. The thread is very soft. The poet, because of course there is always a poet, swears by it. He writes faster, with fewer commas and more adjectives that slouch. He calls it his muse, his mistress, his cleanest habit. He insists it's not addictive because he only uses it when he's writing, and when he's not writing, and when he's thinking about writing, but never when he's sleeping. Except when he is. A magazine publishes an article titled Heroin, The End of Suffering. It features testimonials from school teachers, tailor, and one retired general who claims it cured his sciatica and the memory of war. Even skeptics concede it makes people nicer. A dentist offers it before cleanings, and his patients leave with pristine teeth and a newfound appreciation for clouds. One of them hugs a tree on the way home. The tree, notably, does not mind. The government considers taxing it, then decides not to out of respect, or perhaps fear. Pharmacists polish the bottles like trophies. Housewives swear by its calming effect on their nerves, their husbands, and their wallpaper. Children take it in syrup form, with names like Soothing Elixir No. 5 and Sleep Like Saints Dreaming of Geometry. No one sees a problem because no one is looking for one. People are sleeping better. Arguments end with long sighs and agreements to try again tomorrow. Paris walks slower, but it doesn't stumble. Not yet. The city hums like it's been tuned. You buy your own bottle without hesitation. The label is embossed. The seal is gold. It weighs just enough to feel important in your hand. The pharmacist winks gently as if to say, "You've joined the right side of the future." And when you leave, the door doesn't just chime, it sings. The invitation arrives on ivory cardstock that smells faintly of powder and secrets. It promises an evening of stimulation and the sublime, hosted by someone named Madame Armand, who may be a widow, a clairvoyant, or possibly both. The address is on the Rue de l'Eclipse, a street that doesn't always appear on maps, but always seems to know where you are. You arrive just after midnight, when the sky is a velvet smear and the gas lamps lean inward like they're listening. The townhouse looms narrow and too tall, like it was designed by a fever dream. You're greeted at the door by a man in a burgundy waistcoat and no shoes. He bows deeply, then forgets why, and stands there blinking until someone guides you inside. The salon is the color of candlelight and champagne. Silk drapes brush the floor like gossip. People lounge on velvet divans in various states of ecstasy, elegance, and mild disrepair. There is a photograph in the corner, looping a jazz record that skips at the same cymbal crash every 47 seconds. No one fixes it. The skip becomes part of the rhythm, part of the night. A woman in a satin turban hums along with the mistake. Champagne flows like water in a better country. You sip it slowly, though slowly it has begun to lose its meaning. Conversation swirls around you, half in French, half in metaphor. Someone is arguing about a niche with a palm reader. A man dressed like a retired gondolier swears he once saw time fold in on itself during an eclipse in Sicily. Everyone agrees this sounds plausible. Then the whisper. Would you like to feel like God, but elegant? It comes from a woman with a cigarette holder longer than your arm and pearls that graze her knees. Her eyes glitter like dangerous currency. She leads you through a pair of mirrored doors into a smaller room, warmer, hazier, pulsing like it has a heartbeat of its own. In the center on a lacquered table rests a silver tray holding a row of glass ampules and a cluster of slender gold-tipped syringes arranged with the reverence usually reserved for relics or desserts. This, you are told, is the salon of eternal energy. The hostess gestures to the tray as though unveiling a secret kept since Babylon. Her voice is velvet soaked in mischief. Buyer's finest, not for the sick, darling for the seekers. You hesitate exactly long enough to pretend you had doubts. Then you choose an ampule with a label that reads simply Nuit Blanche. A man in a brocade robe administers the dose with the precision of a maestro. The prick is nothing. The flood is everything. It begins in your fingertips, like memory returning. Your spine straightens. Your thoughts are clear. You feel as if you've been carrying your own name wrong this entire time. Now it fits. The room sharpens, the light grows kinder, and suddenly everyone looks radiant. Or maybe they always were. And now you've caught up. A contest. At least you think she's a countess. Injects herself while leaning on the phonograph. The needle skips again. No one minds. She exhales like she's exercising her former self, then asks a potted plant what it thinks of Debussy. The plant declines to answer. Someone writes a haiku on a napkin and insists it cured their asthma. Time dissolves. Minutes stretch like warm taffy. Then snap. For 11 minutes, you are immortal. Not in the grand, unkillable sense, but in the smaller, more intimate one. The feeling that nothing can truly harm you because you finally understand why everything hurts. Your skin glows. Your laugh tastes like sugar. You dance without music. And when music returns, you feel personally responsible for it. The gam pool empties. The light fades. You sit quietly, your breath still singing. Someone hands you a chocolate truffle and says nothing. It is the most meaningful conversation you've had in weeks. When you leave, dawn is politely knocking at the edges of the sky. Your coat smells of jasmine and ozone. You don't remember exactly what happened, only that it mattered immensely. That for a few shimmering, impossible minutes, you weren't just alive. You were more than that. You were awake. The cafe table is too small for 5 people, but nobody seems to notice. Hemingway elbows his coffee aside to make room for a stack of manuscript pages stained with red wine, cigarette ash, and what might be mustard. He looks at you with the conviction of a man who once wrestled a marlin and then wrote about it in past perfect tense. This stuff, he says, tapping the small glass vial in his vest pocket, makes verbs run faster. You nod, because that feels like something worth agreeing with, and also because you've recently taken a very small dose yourself. The city around you hums like it's trying to whisper something just out of reach. Fitzgerald hasn't spoken in 20 minutes. He's been staring at the floral wallpaper behind the bar, his eyes wide, his fingers twitching like they're trying to keep up with whatever story the hibiscus pattern is telling him. I think he murmurs suddenly. The wallpaper knows too much. You decide not to follow up. The poet to your left wears a black turtleneck and an expression of permanent ecstatic suspicion. He offers you a cigarette, then proceeds to tell you that he's invented a new punctuation mark, the semi-rapture. It's meant to be placed between thoughts that are too profound for a period, but too lazy for a comma. You ask what it looks like. He says, you'll know it when you feel it. You inhale deeply and pretend that you already do. Pages flutter across the table like wounded birds. Someone is reciting a poem aloud, not to anyone in particular, but to the act of recitation itself. It's about moths and absence and maybe socialism. Applause breaks out after the third stanza, mostly from the waiter who's been eavesdropping for tips. Someone else mentions pee and everyone groans in reverence. The heroine isn't spoken of directly. Not here, not now. It's just understood. A shared influence like the weather or unresolved father issues. It comes in tiny vials tucked into jacket linings and cigarette cases, dissolved into a basin, stirred into coffee with a silver spoon that's passed from hand to hand like a relic. No one asks how much is too much. They ask if it rhymes. They ask if it sings. You feel it in your hands. First, the loosening of old doubts, the quiet rearranging of metaphors. Sentences begin to form, fully realized in your mind, like guests arriving, already drunk and charming. You scribble them down furiously, though your handwriting has started to look like a series of small emotional breakdowns. You don't care. The page understands. Outside, Paris flickers. The streetlights blur just enough to look hand-painted. Lovers argue in iambic pentameter. A man in a beret plays the violin with such sincerity that pigeons land just to weep. Time forgets itself. You are no longer writing to be read. You are writing because the air demands it. Hours pass, or days, or just one long blink that stretches into prose. Fitzgerald finally speaks again, declaring that mirrors are a form of betrayal. Hemingway calls this pretty, which in his mouth is both insult and compliment. The poet nods solemnly and takes another pull from his silver flask. Someone is laughing. Someone else is quoting Rimbaud in Latin. Nobody remembers what time it is or why that might matter. You leave with ink-stained fingers and the vague sensation that you've just rewritten history in a cafe on the wrong side of reason. Paris exhales around you. The streets curl like sentences still being written. You walk slowly, carefully, as if the ground is listening. And maybe it is. Everything else seems to be. The first light of morning leaks over Montara like a secret you're not supposed to hear yet. The cobblestones are slick with last night's confessions, and the shutters open one by one, like eyelids fluttering awake too early. The air smells like paint, old bread, and something sharper hiding underneath something alchemical. In the back room of Café Lepo, the artists are already gathered, not painting, not arguing, just existing very deliberately. There's no leader, though the man with the feathered scarf and the carved walking sticks, like the city appointed him prophet. He's mid-Simon about sensation versus perception, and how the heroine has revealed the difference when someone interrupts to pass the tray of syringes arranged in a velvet-lined box, like sacred tools. The poet, there's always at least one, insists on reciting Rimbaud backward before he injects. He says it helps him remember things he hasn't learned yet. A sculptor with burnt fingertips hums tunelessly while he tightens the belt around his arm. The heroine is distributed with more reverence than the Eucharist, though fewer people bow. Most just sigh, lean back, and begin their slow drift toward truth, or at least something close enough to sketch. You take your dose like communion, a gentle push into the skin, a beat, then the warmth. It floods in like melted gold, like you're being gilded from the inside. Your heartbeat slows to a manageable whisper. Your limbs become poetry written in lowercase. You look around the room and everyone else is glowing. Two divine beings in mismatched clothes and unbrushed hair, channeling something too large for language, but just small enough for metaphor. The cafe cat weaves between the chairs, tail held high, eyes narrowed like it's keeping notes on everyone's failings. It pauses beside you and blinks in disapproval, then curls up on the windowsill as if to say, "Carry on, but badly." Someone spills ink across a tabletop and calls it fate. Another man claims the drug helped him finally forgive his father, his ex-lover, and a particularly cruel self-portrait he painted last spring. A saxophone wakes from the next room. Not music exactly, more like grief remembering how to dance. It fills the cafe, presses against your ribs, makes your teeth hum like tuning forks. No one applauds. They simply nod solemnly, like the instrument has confessed something too personal to name. Outside, the normal world carries on at a disrespectful volume. Market vendors shout. Dogs bark at pigeons who don't care. A tram groans its way up the hill. But here, time moves like syrup. Conversations stretch across hours and topics with no discernible transitions. 1 minute you're discussing brushstroke technique. The next, you're dissecting your mother's handwriting and what it says about her ability to love. A man with gold-rimmed spectacles claims the heroin made him see sound as color. He now composes entire symphonies using shades of violet. Another woman, barely awake and entirely barefoot, says she met God in a dream and he offered her tea but forgot the sugar. Everyone agrees that sounds accurate. No one calls it addiction, not yet. They call it clarity, they call it ritual. They call it peeling back the meat of reality to find the shimmering bone underneath. They say it opens doors inside the soul and then politely closes them again behind you so no one notices you've left. You sketch a line on a napkin. It's not brilliant, but it feels necessary. Like a whisper in a crowded room, not heard but felt around you. The artists nod at nothing in particular. The world outside the cafe grows louder, but you remain inside, suspended in that perfect hush between heartbeat and idea. Montart breathes, and you breathe with it. The door is barely a door, more suggestion than structure, warped wood, flaking paint, and a small brass bell that rings like a sigh. You only find it because someone drew you a map on the back of a receipt. And even then, you have to circle the block twice, pretending not to look lost while looking entirely lost. RuPaul leans against itself like an aging dancer, and the apothecary nestles between a shuttered tailor and a bakery that smells like burnt hope. No sign, no hours, no indication it's open or has ever been closed. You push the door open and the shop exhales. It smells of cloves, old paper, and something sweeter underneath, like almonds dipped in sleep. Inside, shelves bow under the weight of glass bottles filled with liquids in impossible colors. Bruised violets, smoky ambers, greens, the shade of envy caught in moonlight. Labels are handwritten in a script that curls and flutters like it's trying to escape. Nothing is priced. Nothing is explained. Behind the counter stands the apothecary, thin, upright, ageless, in the way that suggests either excellent skincare or mild immortality. He wears a vest with too many pockets and glasses that never leave the tip of his nose. His hair is more concept than style. When you walk in, he doesn't greet you, but instead lifts a single vial from a shelf and sets it on the counter. "This is yours," he says. You haven't spoken yet. You ask how he knew. He taps the glass gently. You walk like someone who wants to float. You ask if it's legal. He shrugs. The kind of shrug that covers centuries of polite disobedience. I offer relief, not absolution. You ask what it treats. He gestures to a sign behind him scrolled in chalk in uneven lettering. We treat coughs, nerves, and existence. There's a moment of silence where something cake isn't on the floor. You take the vial. The liquid inside swirls like thought. He doesn't charge you yet, just nods toward a small armchair in the corner. Its upholstery is threadbare, but it looks like it remembers how to hold people gently. You sit. The chair sighs. The light in the shop shifts warmer now, softer at the edges, like the room has drawn its curtains against the world. You uncork the vial. The scent alone is enough to rearrange your priorities. One breath, one sip. The taste is soft and slightly bitter, like a secret you're not sure you were supposed to hear. It doesn't hit you all at once. It arrives in layers. First, your hands go quiet, then your chest loosens, then your thoughts untangle like old ribbon. The knot behind your eyes slips free. You are suddenly aware of the exact weight of your sadness, and then strangely how little of it you actually need to carry. The apothecary watches without watching. He polishes a small glass bottle with the kind of care usually reserved for lullabies. You ask how he remembers everyone's dose. I remember how they entered, he replies. Not their names. Names change, tensions don't. Outside, Rupagol grumbles to life. Footsteps, distant laughter, a dog barking at its reflection. But here, the world is paused, slightly tilted, reframed through honeyed glass. You sit in the quiet for what feels like the right amount of time. When you stand, your limbs respond with grace instead of argument. At the counter, you ask how much you owe. He squints, then shrugs again. You looked like you needed it. You leave some francs anyway. He doesn't touch them. They remain on the counter, like a confession no one asked for. As you step back into the street, the door sighs behind you. The air smells sharper now, crisper, less cruel. You walk away slowly, vial in your pocket, thoughts untangled, and for the first time in a while, your shadow doesn't seem quite so heavy. Everyone you know is brilliant, tragic, and 27. It's the unofficial age of genius here. the sweet spot before disillusion calcifies into something heavier. Mornings in Paris arrive slowly, drifting through the curtains like shy strangers, and you wake to the clatter of cups and typewriter keys echoing from other apartments. Breakfast is coffee strong enough to wake the dead, a croissant that flakes like fragile hope, and a dose of something clear and chemical stirred into the day the way others stir sugar. Letters sprawl across your desk, pages of declarations you'll never mail, apologies to people you haven't wronged yet, love notes for strangers glimpsed across cafés, manifestos about art, the future, and why you'll never return to Ohio. The ink smells sharp and alive, and when the bottle tips, you smear the black tide across your wrist and decide it looks poetic. Outside, the cafés breathe like living creatures, smoky windows, crowded tables, every surface littered with notebooks and empty glasses. You slide into a seat among the others, painters with frayed cuffs, playwrights with deliberate despair, poets whose pockets jingle with unpaid tabs. Everyone is convinced they're changing the world, or at least making it prettier before it collapses. The air smells of ink, yeast, turpentine, and the faint chemical sweetness that now hangs everywhere. "We are the future," someone says. He's thin and electric, eyes too wide for mourning. He means it, and for a second, you almost believe him. Then a woman across the table laughs softly, like she's been the future before, and it didn't work out. She dips her croissant into a basin because milk is bourgeois. Hemingway bursts in loudly as the weather. He orders wine before sitting, tosses a stack of pages onto the table, and demands someone read them. Fitzgerald drifts behind him, pale and golden, eyes lit with some fragile glow that could be genius or self-destruction. He sits, doesn't speak, just stares at the ceiling fan as if it's telling him secrets. The poet with the black turtleneck announces a new metaphor for loneliness and receives modest applause. Someone hands you a vial, the little white miracle that keeps ideas soft and possible. No ceremony now. It's as common as matches. You take a slow breath and taste almonds and surrender. The chatter of the cafe bends, softens, then clarifies like someone turned the dial on existence to the right frequency. The faces around you sharpen, lit from within, every flaw glowing wholly. Conversation swerves wildly, faster than you can follow. Arguments about form and color spiral into confessions about childhood and war. Someone cries, then laughs at the crying, then orders another round. A painter insists every stroke is a prayer. A playwright claims stories are just lies dressed for dinner. Everyone is alive with it, vibrating at the edge of brilliance and collapse. You step out for air and find Montparnasse drenched in noonlight. It's loud and careless bicycles, bells, a drunk singing an aria to a bored horse. You lean against the cafe wall, notebook under your arm, heart fluttering with something that might be joy or might be the drug. The world tilts in a way that makes everything seem written just for you. The bent lamppost, the laughing girl, the man asleep on a stack of newspapers like a misplaced headline. Back inside, Fitzgerald finally speaks. "It's all so beautiful," he says quietly, almost to himself. Hemingway snorts but doesn't disagree. The room hums with shared silence, a kind of fragile awe that could shatter or bloom at any moment, and then it's gone. Someone jokes, someone orders brandy. Pages scatter, you scribble another line in your notebook, though it's half a thought, and you'll hate it later. Still, it feels alive right now, and that's enough. The sun keeps climbing, the day goes on. Everyone is still brilliant, still tragic, still 27, and for a few fleeting hours, it seems possible to stay that way forever. The streetlights have given up trying to guide anyone. They flicker lazily, as if winking at the chaos they've agreed to ignore. Montparnasse hum with the fevered breath of people who've forgotten that the night has an ending. It's 3 a.m., which means nothing and everything. Time doesn't apply here. Not when the streets are louder than your thoughts and the moon looks drunk. You wander because that's what Paris wants from you tonight. Not a destination, just motion. Jazz spills from every doorway, bleeding onto the pavement like wine from a broken bottle. Each bar you pass plays in a different key, but somehow they all harmonize, like the city itself is composing a fever dream in real time. You step into a club where the floor tilts, whether from design or disrepair is unclear. The air is velvet and smoke, thick with perfume and ambition. A trumpet player on stage wears a bow tie and no shirt. His notes spiral upward, piercing the ceiling, maybe the sky. You're halfway through admiring his fingering technique when he collapses mid-note, horns still clutched like a lifeline. No one screams. Instead, applause erupts. The room is impressed by his commitment to art. A woman near the bar fans herself and whispers, "Brilliant," like he died on purpose. You step over him gently on your way out. Outside, the laughter continues. It echoes through alleys, ricocheting like stray bullets of joy. You see a woman in a flapper dress dancing barefoot in the gutter, swirling with the grace of someone who's either in love or just very good at pretending. A man wearing only trousers and a monkey is reciting bodily to a street lamp. The lamp seems flattered. You keep walking. At a corner cafe that never technically opens but never really closes. Someone hands you a cigarette and a theory about the soul's elasticity. You nod because it feels true, even if you didn't hear the beginning. A stray dog lies across the threshold like a philosopher in retirement. You step around it, careful not to wake his dreams. Two painters argue in hushed violence over a shade of blue no one else can see. One throws a wine bottle. It misses and shatters on the cobblestone, raining glass like exclamation points. The conversation continues. Behind them, a couple kisses like they're trying to inhale each other's childhoods. A waiter, possibly fictional, brings you an espresso without asking. You thank him and mean it. The night stretches impossibly long. Somewhere along Rue de l'Ombre, a gramophone plays a tune you know you've never heard, but remember anyway. You follow the sound until you find the source. An elderly man in a silk robe standing at a third-story window conducting the music like it's an orchestra and not just a dusty record. He sees you, bows once, then disappears. The music stays until 4:10 a.m. You've forgotten why you ever slept. You find yourself by the river, watching its black silk glide under the bridges. The Seine doesn't reflect the city, it absorbs it. Across the water, a girl with green gloves drops a lit match and watches it float, a tiny meteor against the tide. She waves to you like an old friend or a remembered version of yourself. Back on the boulevard, the night has bloomed to full delirium. A poet on roller skates offers you a manifesto he wrote on cafe napkins. You take it and promise to read it later. You won't, but it feels sacred in your pocket, like something Paris meant to tell you and chose him to whisper it. And still, no one sleeps. Not because they can't, because they don't want to. Because here, in this sleepless delirium, in this opera of laughter and shattered glass and too much trumpet, Paris forgets how to stop. And so do you. The salon smells faintly of talcum, Turkish tobacco, and something more precise, antiseptic maybe, or money. A room where nothing unpleasant is permitted to exist for long, except perhaps boredom. Afternoon light slants politely through embroidered curtains, catching on porcelain teacups and the slow drip of gold from brooches and chandeliers. You're not entirely sure how you ended up here, a friend of a friend, or perhaps just well-dressed confusion. But you've been handed a saucer and told to mind your posture. The Countess of Maurice is explaining her nerves again. They are tired, she says, from reading bad news and not being allowed to shoot anyone. Across from her, the Baroness d'Alençon nods sagely while adjusting a bracelet that costs more than several small towns. There is no actual tea, not anymore. Only champagne and something called restorative syrup served in etched glass vials on a mirrored tray. You've heard it called other things in other places, street names, medical names, names whispered in bathrooms and shouted in back alleys. But here it is, just heroin pronounced like a perfume. A doctor is in attendance, though he's mostly decorative. He has excellent hair and the calm expression of a man who has never been denied anything, even by biology. He gestures now with surgical grace toward the tray, offering the dose like communion. The Countess accepts first, brushing her curls back with one gloved hand before rolling up her sleeve. Her skin is pale as paper, and the injection leaves barely a trace, only the sigh she releases afterward. At last she says, eyes fluttering, "Serenity." The room nods as if she's quoted scripture. A maid faints quietly by the wall, but no one moves to help. That's the trouble with the lower classes. The Baroness murmurs too many feelings. A footman appears and drags the girl out with the discretion of someone who's practiced. The room resets itself. Conversation resumes at a murmur, like water returning to its glass. You sip your drink slowly and try not to look impressed. The room is beautiful in a way that should feel oppressive, but doesn't. A piano plays itself in the next room. A mechanical marvel recently shipped from Vienna, and the notes float over the scene like a soundtrack composed by expensive ghosts. Someone tells a story about a duchess who got so high she tried to elope with a statue. No one thinks it's strange, only go that it was a statue of Napoleon. The Baroness is next. She rolls down a silk stocking and offers her leg with the air of a woman receiving a diamond rather than a dose. The doctor obliges, not touching more than protocol allows. She smiles as the drug enters her, a slow smile that blooms from the inside out like a flower with a secret. Outside, a carriage goes past its speed, scattering pigeons like accusations. You watch it through the window and imagine it crashing, rolling, catching fire, but nothing crashes here. Nothing burns unless requested. The ladies begin to float conversationally. The word modernity appears often, so does exhaustion. One speaks of her dreams as if they were property investments. Another wonders aloud if the moon is lonelier than Sunday. You've stopped listening closely because the air has changed. Time has gone syrupy. Your fingertips feel like someone else's. The wallpaper sways, not unkindly. A man you think he's a viscount, though you aren't sure what that entails, recites a poem about opium and horses. It isn't very good, but everyone claps. A glass breaks, then repairs itself through collective denial. You wonder how long you've been sitting, or if you ever stood at all. Someone near you whispers that God must have nerves too. You are not expected to respond. By the time the light outside has faded to velvet, the room has emptied a little. The maid has returned with faint defiance in her step. The Countess is asleep in her chair, one gloved hand curled over a brooch shaped like a lily. The Baroness stares at the ceiling and hums a lullaby no one taught her. You leave quietly, heart pulsing with borrowed calm, shoes echoing on the marble like an alibi. Paris breathes against the windows, untouched and eternal. The city doesn't know what happened in that room, and wouldn't care if it did. You walk out into dusk, strangely upright, head full of lilies and silk and needles and lace. The world feels heavier than you remembered, but softer too, as though it's been padded for your comfort. You suspect you'll be invited back. The waiting room has chairs, but nobody sits. Everyone stands like they're in line for something important. Judgment, maybe, or salvation. You can't tell if this is a hospital or a fashion show sponsored by anemia. The walls are sterile, white, and hum faintly with fluorescent ambition. A nurse glides past in heels too elegant for triage, trailing the scent of disinfectant and crushed violets. Her clipboard is blank. You suspect it always has been. You're here for treatment, though no one calls it that out loud. Not anymore. The doctor enters like a magician, coat flapping behind him as if it's attempting to escape. His glasses sparkle. His eyes do not. He greets you with a handshake and a quote from Goethe. You're not sure what Gura has to do with your pancreas, but it feels rude to question. He begins to explain your symptoms using phrases like spiritual fatigue, existential inflammation, and emotional disrepair. You nod along. Everyone does. You've learned that here. The less you understand, the better the care. Then he holds up a small glass bottle filled with amber light. This, he says with solemn drama, is what sunrise would look like if it came in liquid form. You want to laugh, but you're too tired or maybe too curious. The doctor calls it diamorphine, his voice dipping into Latin like it's a prayer. He tells you it was once meant for coughs. Then it became a balm for the broken, the brilliant, and the bored. Now it's a lifestyle. He prescribes you 3 vials, a velvet pouch, and a sense of purpose. Next door, a woman sobs softly while a nurse rubs her back and fills her syringe. She thanks him with the politeness of a tea guest. Down the hallway, a man insists he can walk now. No one remembers why he couldn't before. Another patient claims to have remembered his mother's maiden name after 2 doses. The doctor calls it a neurological bloom. You begin to suspect none of these people are here for anything curable. You pass a room labeled observation that is filled with mirrors and not much else. Inside, a girl in her 20s is practicing how to blink like she's okay. A therapist scribbles notes with a quill. You don't ask. In the break room, 2 interns are arguing over whether Van Gogh would have cut off both ears if he had access to heroin. One of them is laughing too hard to make a point. The vending machine dispenses syringes, antiseptic wipes, and applause. Back in your room, You lie on the cot while a second doctor, this one wearing a mobile and sneakers, adjusts your dosage for poetry. You ask him what that means. He shrugs and says something about the spleen's relationship to metaphor. It's unclear whether he's joking. You begin to feel a little floaty, like someone untethered your thoughts and replaced them with steam. Someone outside your door starts singing. The voice is good, too good for a hallway, and you wonder if it's part of your treatment. You lie there, hands folded over your chest, like you're auditioning for a Renaissance painting, and feel the edges of yourself start to blur. The drug works fast, and that's part of the magic. You're still you, but the version that forgives more easily. Your heartbeat slows into a jazz rhythm. Pain, emotional, physical, ideological, folds itself into a neat envelope and gets mailed somewhere else, probably Vienna. The doctor returns and smiles like a priest whose congregation has finally started levitating. He says, "Your vitals are lyrically stable. You have no idea what that means, but it sounds exquisite." You ask if you're cured. He tilts his head like a curious bird and replies, "Cure is such an old-fashioned word." By the time you leave, the hospital is turned into a ballroom. Patients waltz with their IV poles, nurses pass orders, someone in radiology is mixing cocktails. A man in a wheelchair proposes to an X-ray technician, and she accepts before remembering she's already married. No one minds. There's a standing ovation as a child in orthopedic boots moonwalks across the polished floor. Outside, the night is unbothered. Stars blink overhead like they're waiting for reviews. You walk home a little slower than usual, not because you're weak, but because the pavement feels optional. Paris glows behind you, full of clinics that cure nothing and make everything feel better. For now, that's enough. The glassblower's hands are steady, but his voice shakes when he laughs. You meet him in a courtyard behind a bakery that only sells bread to the right kind of people, which is to say, people with scandal in their eyes and cash in their pockets. His shirt is singed at the cuffs, his fingernails stained with soot, and yet he holds each vial like it's a hummingbird made of secrets. He hasn't touched heroin, not once, not even to taste the edge of it. But he's made thousands of homes for a delicate glass ampoule designed to hold something heavier than truth. "You know," he says, watching one cool on a tray, "it's the most stable job I've ever had." You think about that as he lights the torch again, flame roaring like applause. His workbench is cluttered with hollow tubes and curved tweezers, the instruments of someone who shapes addiction into elegance. He says the orders used to come from hospitals, then from pharmacies. Now it's salons, private clubs, and occasionally a priest. You ask if that bothers him. He shrugs like a man who's had this conversation before and always ends it with a shrug. "Someone's gonna make the vessels," he says, turning the glass slowly in the heat. "Might as well be me. At least I make them beautiful." Down the street, a banker signs a shipment receipt without looking up. He's wearing a suit so crisp it could file taxes on its own. His office smells like leather, ink, and cologne, named after Roman emperors. He keeps 3 vials in his desk drawer, nestled between fountain pens and moral flexibility. When he offers you coffee, it arrives with a sugar cube and an unspoken promise not to ask questions. The banker smiles wider than the addict. He tells you the market is strong, not for heroin itself. Of course, not officially, but for the companies that distribute therapeutic supplements. He uses words like portfolio diversification, stabilized euphoria, and post-crisis consumer optimism. He leans back in his chair, like someone whose conscience is on permanent holiday in Nice. Morality, he says, swirling his espresso, is simply a matter of margins. You're not sure if he's joking. You laugh anyway, because the alternative is silence, and silence in this office would feel like a confession. Later, you walk through the array and see the effects. The city is humming, pulsing with invisible transactions. Pain is packaged, commodified, and made palatable. A woman in pearls buys 10 vials from a man in a trench coat and hands them out like wedding favors. Behind her, a cab driver picks up his daughter from school and doesn't mention what's tucked in the glove box. In a gallery window, a sculpture of a spoon is labeled Contemporary Alchemy. You watch 2 men in suits nod at it solemnly, pretending they don't understand the joke. At a nearby cafe, someone jokes that Paris runs on caffeine, wine, and denial. You order all 3 and don't disagree. As night folds over the city, the glassblower finishes another batch. He packs each ampule into velvet-lined boxes, the kind usually reserved for jewelry or sins. He signs the invoice with a flourish and leans back, stretching the muscles that make beauty for a living. He never touches the product. He doesn't need to. He's already part of the system, the elegant middleman in a transaction of forgetting. You pass the banker's building again on your way home. The lights are still on. Through the window, you see him pour something golden into a crystal glass. He toasts no one and drinks like he's earning interest on it. Somewhere in Paris, a vial is dropped, and the sound it makes is not a shatter, it's a bell. You wonder how long the city can keep ringing. The first letter arrives on linen paper, thick enough to be mistaken for sincerity. You find it folded 3 times, tucked into a ledger that hasn't balanced in weeks. The ink smells faintly of rosewood and smoke, the handwriting crisp, restrained, as if drafted by someone wearing gloves. Dear Otto, it begins. I've enclosed samples of salvation. You pause, unsure if that's metaphor or invoice. It is both. Chang signs his name with a flourish that implies empire. He is somewhere in Shanghai, or at least pretending to be. No return address, just a red wax seal shaped like a dragon mid-yawn. You imagine him reclining in a silk chair surrounded by crates marked textiles, tea, and miscellaneous. You imagine he laughs often, but only when it profits him. Otto, on the other end, is as precise as his nation's clocks. He files the letter under inquiries, the vials under experiments, and the smell under unlisted side effects. He works from a laboratory that used to be a chapel. The stained glass window above his desk depicts Sebastian, whose expression closely resembles Otto's when he accidentally discovers a new derivative. His beard is trimmed to regulation length. His emotions are kept in amber. They write to each other weekly. The letters never use the word heroin. They prefer phrases like amber clarity and exquisite oblivion. Every parcel exchanged is part confession, part logistics. A recent shipment contains opium resin in a porcelain snuff box shaped like a panda. Otto replies with a new emulsifier wrapped in banknotes from 3 different countries. None of them are his. By month 3, they are exchanging poetry. Otto quotes Chang counters with Tang Dynasty verse. You suspect neither of them cares about the poems. It's a dance, the kind diplomats perform before invasions. One letter arrives stained with rain and the faint perfume of a city that's too proud to sleep. It reads, "The market ripens like fruit. Shall we harvest?" Otto responds with a recipe. Their operation spreads like gossip. Couriers disguised as missionaries, warehouse clerks who never ask about weight discrepancies, a monastery in Lyon repurposed as a distribution hub for spiritual medicine. Everyone thinks someone else has checked the paperwork. No one does. They build a supply chain stitched together by plausible deniability and superior calligraphy. You meet a man on the docks who's been bribed in 4 languages. He says the ships come in with textiles and leave heavy with absence. He doesn't know what's inside the crates. He doesn't want to know, but he walks with a cane carved from ivory and hums like he's forgotten what guilt sounds like. Chang begins signing his letters, your devoted friend in trade and transcendence. Otto switches from ink to typewriter. The rhythm of their correspondence accelerates. More samples, more formulas, more euphemisms. By the time French customs officials stumble across a mislabeled crate filled with glass ampules, the contents are already out of fashion and into veins. The brilliance is in the subtlety. No manifesto, no cartel, no map with red string connecting their names. Just 2 men, one with access, the other with ambition, moving salvation by gram. The envelopes smell more pungent now, like fortune and decay. You read the latest and wonder how many lives can be folded into a letter. How much damage fits inside a sentence if you remove the punctuation. You sit in a cafe that unknowingly serves their product in espresso cups and watch a woman stir her coffee without looking. Her wrist trembles slightly, like it remembers something her mind refuses to. Outside, a tram groans past, carrying workers, widows, and a box labeled fragrance oils that could burn down a country. You think of Chang in his study toasting nothing, under stained glass, adjusting his measurements, of salvation, still crossing oceans disguised as correspondence, and Paris still pretending not to notice. The club is underground, literally, and otherwise. You descend a staircase with no handrail and fewer moral boundaries. Smoke coils upward in lazy spirals, curling around your ankles like it knows your name. Inside, the room pulses. Red light, bassline, breath. A trumpet moans from the far corner like it's trying to apologize for something it hasn't done yet. You feel it in your sternum before you hear it. The crowd is pressed together, all velvet and sweat. Nobody dances. They just sway, heads tilted, eyes glassy like they're watching someone else's dream through a fishbowl. You wonder if they even remember the door. At the bar, the drinks are strong enough to sterilize wounds. You order something amber and expensive, and the bartender doesn't blink when you drop a tiny vial into the glass. Neither does the man next to you who's tuning a clarinet with the concentration of a priest preparing for mass. His knuckles are stained, not from ink. The music changes, and so does the room. Time folds in on itself. The drummer is a metronome possessed. Eyes shut, lips moving in silent argument with a god who refuses to answer. The bassist nods slowly like he's explaining the meaning of life in Morse code. And the trumpet, dear God, the trumpet, it doesn't play. It mourns. You close your eyes and swear it's weeping. Someone offers you a cigarette, laced with something floral and irreversible. You take it. Everyone here speaks the same dialect of yearning, behind you. A couple kisses like it's the last war and they're losing. The saxophonist collapses mid-solo, but keeps playing from the floor. No one helps him up. They just lean in closer. They call it the slow time. It isn't a rhythm. It's an atmosphere. Heroin doesn't sharpen the music. It melts it. Notes stretch and blur, dissolving into each other like ink and water. Every measure becomes a memory. Every solo is a confession. The audience breathes as one, like a hive of beautiful, buzzing tragedies. You look around and realize half the crowd is using, not hiding it, flaunting it. Sleeves rolled, pupils wide, smiles that don't reach their cheeks. A woman in a green dress injects with one hand while balancing a champagne flute in the other. Her laugh is slow, syrupy, detached from time. You spot a boy in the corner, barely 17, jaw slack, eyes locked on the ceiling like it just told him a secret. His foot taps out of sync with the music. You wonder what he was before this room. A poet, a mechanic, a son. He doesn't move again for the rest of the set. Between songs, the band doesn't speak. They just nod at each other like war veterans sharing a foxhole. The silence between notes is louder than applause. Someone snaps their fingers in place of clapping. You join in. It feels appropriate, more sacred. Outside, the world is still turning, but you wouldn't know it. Down here, time forgot to matter. You glance at your watch, and it laughs at you. 4 hours have passed, or 20 minutes, or none. Paris has gone to sleep without you. You step back into the street, clothes soaked in jazz and something chemical. The dawn is starting to blush. Somewhere a baker is waking up to begin his day. You're just ending yours. Your ears still ring with trumpet ghosts. Your fingers twitch with phantom rhythms. You know you'll return tomorrow or tonight, or maybe you never really left. They sit in the corner booth, lit by the low amber bulb that makes everything look like a memory. Her lipstick is smudged just enough to suggest devotion. His collar is rumpled like a flag at half-mast. A spoon rests between them on a napkin, polished to the shine of ritual. They say nothing for a long time because nothing needs to be said. Their silence isn't empty. It's heavy, like velvet soaked in wine. You know their names, though they've changed them 3 times in the last week. Last Tuesday, they were Jacques and Odette. Tonight, they're Emile and Celeste. Tomorrow, they might be gone or reborn, depending on the dose. You came in for coffee, or at least that's what you tell yourself. You order it bitter and black, hoping it will anchor you. It doesn't. The air smells like sugar and smoke and something metallic underneath, like rusted secrets. A waiter walks past with a tray full of lies and pastries. You lose track of time halfway through your first sip. Across the room, Emile fills a syringe with the precision of a watchmaker and the reverence of a priest. Celeste watches him like she's memorizing his hands for later. They're whispering to each other, and you catch fragments tomorrow. Last time. Just enough. You've heard it before. So have they. She rests her head on his shoulder. He kisses her forehead like a promise he doesn't plan to keep. The needle disappears under the table. And for a moment, they look like any other lovers. Ordinary, delusional, hopeful. Then their eyes lose focus in perfect synchrony. And it's like watching stars blink out in a clear sky. The music in the cafe is slow, lazy, too aware of itself. A piano trundles through a waltz that doesn't believe in rhythm anymore. The chandelier above flickers like it's trying to decide if it should care. You check your watch, but time has stopped taking your calls. Celeste giggles. It's a strange helium laugh that floats above the conversation like it doesn't belong to her. Emile says something in return, probably poetic, definitely absurd. They both laugh harder, like people who are trying to forget what laughter used to mean. You wonder if they'll make it through the night, or if that's even the point anymore. She leans in and kisses him. Not a peck, not a devouring, just something soft, like a feather brushing past a bruise. His hand lingers on her cheek longer than necessary. They aren't in a rush. Eternity is their desert course. You see her mouth the word always. He answers with a nod, so slow it could be mistaken for sleep. They could be angels or junkies or both in Paris. Those lines have long since blurred. The waiter brings them cake, as if sugar could compete. Neither of them touches it. They stare at the plate like it's the future sweet, untouched and slightly melting around them. The cafe buzzes on. People smoke, flirt, debate art, pretend not to notice the quiet tragedy playing out under the tablecloth. Celeste reaches into her purse and pulls out a notebook. She writes something quickly, tears the page and slips it into Emile's jacket. He doesn't look at it. That's for later, or never. Maybe both. They stay like that for another hour, maybe 3. You watch them the way you'd watch a play where you already know the ending, but can't help hoping for a rewrite. At one point, Emile lights a cigarette and holds it for both of them, passing it back and forth with the solemn grace of monks sharing communion. When it burns down to the filter, he drops it into his coffee and signals for the check. They leave without looking back. No coat, no rush, no goodbye. Just 2 silhouettes disappearing into the Paris night like smoke curling into fog. You stare at the empty booth and wonder what tomorrow means to people like them. Maybe everything, maybe nothing at all. The waiter clears their table in silence. He folds the napkin like a flag and doesn't bother with the untouched cake. You think of chasing after them, but stay rooted, anchored by caffeine and caution. Outside, the rain starts without asking permission. You pull your coat tighter, but the cold seeps through anyway. On the sidewalk, there are 2 sets of footprints headed nowhere in particular. You follow them for a block, then stop. Some promises are meant to be broken. Some love stories are written with needle points. Father Duval's hands tremble just slightly as he lifts the chalice. You think it's nerves until you spot the glass vial tucked inside the folds of his cassock, nestled like a relic between pockets of incense and fading Latin. The congregation watches with the kind of awe usually reserved for eclipses or royal weddings. You sit in the back pew, not entirely sure if this is blasphemy, performance art, or the latest French interpretation of salvation. He speaks with a voice like honey melting over gravel, warm, sticky, and uneven. We are all in pain, he says, and God has given us balm. His eyes flutter toward the altar, where instead of wine there are neatly arranged syringes, the body of Christ, now with faster absorption rates. The stained glass windows glow in the late morning sun, casting kaleidoscopic halos over the faithful. A boy beside you doodles angels with syringes for wings. His mother doesn't stop him. She's too busy weeping into a lace handkerchief, whispering thank yous in 3 languages. Father Duval continues, we do not inject sin, we extract sorrow. Somewhere behind you, someone exhales audibly, as if this phrase unlocked a door they'd been knocking on for years. A man in a beret stands and claps once before realizing no one's joining him. He sits back down, a little holier, a little embarrassed. Communion takes longer now. Each parishioner approaches with reverence in thin veins. Duval administers with a grace that suggests both medical training and mysticism. He murmurs blessings with each dose, crossing himself between every injection like he's warding off doubt. The line moves slowly. No one complains. You step forward out of curiosity or peer pressure or despair. It's hard to tell in churches. When it's your turn, he looks at you with eyes that have seen too much and decided to love it anyway. Do you believe it? He asks softly, drawing the syringe like an artist unsheathing a brush. You nod because no seems like the wrong answer. The warmth hits first, then the stillness. It feels like God is finally answering his mail. You float back to your seat, knees weaker than faith, but stronger than fear. The pew hums under you, or maybe that's your pulse. The sermon continues, but it's hard to focus. Everything is glowing, the wood, the candles, your thoughts. A woman next to you sways gently, smiling at nothing. You smile back. After the service, there are confessions, but no shame. People line up not to be absolved, but to be understood. Duval listens like he's memorizing pain, cataloging it for future homilies. One man sobs about losing his daughter, and Duval gives him a second dose. For the ache behind the ache, he says. Another woman admits she hasn't believed in years. He smiles. God believes in you. This will help. Outside, pigeons scatter as the congregation spills into the street, dazed but grateful. A man lights a cigarette with communion still warm in his veins. A teenager skips down the steps, humming a hymn in a jazz tempo. You watch them and wonder if this is healing or just a distraction. Maybe both. Maybe that's enough. Duval stands at the top of the stairs, cassock fluttering like a worn flag. He blesses a stray dog. He waves at a taxi. He looks exhausted and exalted all at once. One of the older nuns brings him a cup of tea and a biscuit. He dunks it with shaking fingers, then laughs when it crumbles into the cup. Like life, he says to no one in particular. Word spreads, as it always does. Soon the church is full every day, even Wednesdays. Parisians come with their wounds, visible or otherwise, and leave with a silence stitched across their chests. Other priests whisper behind closed doors, torn between doctrine and demand. The archbishop sends a letter. Duval reads it aloud during Mass, then sets it on fire and uses the ashes to mark the next forehead. You return one Sunday and find a new mural painted in the abs. Mary cradling a golden syringe, her face serene and unknowable. Someone asks if it's sacrilegious. Duval replies only if it doesn't work. You think of miracles and side effects. You sit down and close your eyes. For a moment, the world is quiet and every sin feels solvable. The morning forgets itself. You wake to the sound of a clock striking nothing. Its hands whirl like a drunk ballerina trying to curtsy, and you realize it's not even plugged in. On the windowsill, a cat yawns into the fog, unimpressed by the concept of time or breakfast. You step outside and notice something's missing. The usual bakery queue was absent. The scent of baguette and ambition vanished. A man stares into the empty bangery with the same confusion reserved for canceled weddings and silent films without subtitles. Flair feels underwater. A butcher leans against his shopfront in an apron stained with yesterday, smoking a cigarette he doesn't remember lighting. The florist arranges dead tulips with deliberate optimism. You ask her the time and she laughs, not unkindly, just like someone who's decided clocks are rumors. Your feet carry you toward Montmartre, where the painters used to argue about light and perspective. Now they sleep through dawn like they've made peace with the void. One emerges around noon in a robe that might once have been white, dragging a canvas like a tired priest pulling an altar. He paints with the speed of erosion, each stroke an echo. You watch him dab blue onto blue and declare it a revolution. No one corrects him. At the cafe, the waiter greets you with a nod and forgets to bring coffee. You don't remind him. He sits down across from you and lights your cigarette instead. Time's broken, he says, exhaling like a philosopher trapped in a lounge singer. We're free now. He stirs an empty cup and looks out at nothing in particular. The only people still keeping a schedule are the heroin vendors, and even they've switched from watches to instinct. At the apothecary, the clockmaker's entire collection now lines the back wall, ticking like anxious applause. None of them are set. Some run backward. One chimes every time someone exhales. You ask the pharmacist what time it is. He shrugs. Do a clock. Your days melt. Mornings become theoretical. You mark the passage of time by the fading bruises on your arm and the changing flavors of hallucinations. Yesterday, or perhaps the day before, a saxophone cried for 10 straight hours beneath your window. You applauded between sets. The musician never appeared. In the absence of time, people get creative. A woman in Saint Germain holds funerals for Mondays. She buries alarm clocks in her garden and invites strangers to say a few words. You attend once, eulogize punctuality, and eat cake shaped like calendars. It tastes like cinnamon and permission. You find yourself in a reading salon where the authors no longer finish their novels. They prefer the opening lines, infinite beginnings, no conclusions. One poet recites the same stanza for 3 hours, changing the tone each time until you swear it's about death, then love, then possibly soup. You cry anyway. At night, Paris glows with the electricity of confusion. Street lamps flicker on at noon and pigeons sleep in doorways. A man stands in the middle of the boulevard reading a newspaper from last week, unaware the print is smeared with ash. He looks up and waves like he knows you. Maybe he does. You try to remember when you last felt sober. Not clean, just clear. You count backward using landmarks. The day you ate breakfast. The time you argued about God with a violinist. The night you kissed someone whose name was probably Jean. It gets harder after that. Events blur into moods. Moods blur into shadows. You wake up holding a coat that isn't yours. Inside the pocket, a note reads, "See you whenever." Eventually, even the trains give up. Gunnord echoes with silence and suitcases that never move. A conductor plays cards with a priest and a sex worker. All three look like they've slept on benches and dreamed of clocks melting into soup. You begin to understand. Without time, there's no shame in being late, no guilt in leaving early, no pressure to become anything other than what you already are, which is, depending on the moment, either a vessel of raw potential or a tired body looking for softness. Paris doesn't judge. She just drifts beside you like a companion who's forgotten the plot but enjoys the scenery. One afternoon, it might be Thursday or a hallucinated Tuesday, you find the baker back at his post. He pulls a crooked loaf from the oven and offers it with a wink. "Time returned this morning," he says, tapping his temple. "Only for 10 minutes. I used it to bake." You bite in. It's warm, imperfect, and tastes like memory. You sit on the curb and let the crumbs fall between your knees. Across the street, a dog howls at a sundial. The sun isn't out. The dial reads midnight. You nod in approval. Paris sighs. You exhale. No alarms, no appointments, just the rhythm of breath and the sound of a city still spinning even if nobody's counting. The factory smells like seduction and something more desperate hiding beneath it. Like someone tried to bottle a secret and accidentally labeled it with a flower. You arrive just as the constables do. Truncheons in hand, uniforms pressed so tight they look ironed onto bones. One of them yells about improper enthusiasm, which is apparently the new legal term for anything louder than despair. Inside, the workers don't flinch. They continue stirring vats and bottling bliss, as if the police are just part of the decor now. Perfume girls in pale blue smoke hum lullabibis in minor keys. Their gloves shimmer with flecks of crushed rose petals and the occasional glint of something stronger. One girl winks at you and mouths, "Don't inhale too deep." You do anyway. Your eyes water, but not from the roses. The lead inspector demands the manager. A man in a pinstriped suit emerges from behind a velvet curtain with the calm of someone who has rehearsed denial. He carries a clipboard, a handkerchief, and the faint scent of expensive concealment. "We are a fragrance house," he says. "We bottle emotions." He gestures toward a table of dainty bottles with names like Melancholy No. 3 and Sunday in August. The constable raises an eyebrow at No. 7. That's the one they're here for. No. 7 is supposedly a blend of jasmine, sandalwood, and something unlisted that makes your fingers forget what they're holding. Rumor says it's diluted heroin cut with nostalgia. The bottle is small, round, and criminally elegant. You know someone who dabbed it on their wrists and didn't stop smiling for 3 days. They forgot who they were on day 2. When they remembered, they cried for the rest of the week. The constables begin opening boxes, each labeled in delicate gold script. They sniff. They frown. One of them starts to sway slightly, as if hit by a memory too tender to survive. Another uncovers No. 4 and stares into space for a full minute before declaring it legal. You lose track of time watching them spiral gently through the inventory. By the time they reach No. 7, they've forgotten why they came. Still, procedure is procedure. They uncover it. The inspector takes a cautious whiff, then a longer one. His shoulders drop. He hums. Actually hums like a man discovering the meaning of life in a forgotten bakery. You've never seen law enforcement look so peaceful. His partner blinks slowly, places the bottle back on the shelf with a reverence usually reserved for relics and good poetry. He mutters, "It's just perfume," but doesn't sound convincing. They leave empty-handed. Pockets may be a little heavier, eyes glassier than before. The manager bows as they exit, offering complimentary samples for the wives. The youngest constable accepts too. You hold the door for them just to feel useful. Back inside, production resumes like nothing happened. Bottles clink against glass trays. The scent thickens. You watch as one of the workers slips a vial into her sleeve with the ease of someone who's done it every day since Christmas. The label reads, "Memory slightly edited." You ask the manager how they get away with it. He smiles slowly and richly. "We've discovered people don't want to be sober," he says. "They want to feel curated." He hands you a sample of No. 7. It's warm in your palm. "A little heaven," he whispers, with just enough ruin to keep it French. You haven't used it yet. You carry it in your coat pocket through the streets of Paris, unsure if you're afraid or savoring the delay. The city smells different now, not like bread or wine or damp stone. It smells like secrets wrapped in lace. Every passerby seems just a little more still, a little more posed. You begin to wonder if the whole city is dosed. Maybe it always was. At night, you sit on your windowsill with the bottle between your fingers. You raise it to your nose, but stop short, imagining yourself slipping too far in, becoming someone else or no one. You set it down gently. Below you, the streets hum with footsteps that don't quite touch the ground. A breeze carries the faintest trace of roses and ruin. The factory lights glow into the evening, and somewhere a constable whistles as he forgets everything he used to enforce. Paris forgets how to blink. You wake to silence thick as plaster, sunlight scraping at the window like it's angry at you specifically. Your sheets are damp and twisted around your legs like a protest. Breathing feels like a decision you have to consciously make every 5 seconds. You count each one. You lose track at 7. The walls are too loud. They hum with something ancient and judgmental. Somewhere above you, a neighbor drags a chair for what sounds like 12 straight minutes. Somewhere below, a faucet drips with the precision of a metronome built by spite. The city, usually drunk on its own beauty, now trembles like it's seen its own reflection and didn't like what it found. You make it to the mirror and wish you hadn't. Your eyes are glassy in the way that says past tense, and your skin has adopted a new shade of existential crisis. You look like you were poured into your body incorrectly. Outside, the cafés are shuttered or just abandoned mid-service. Tables still bear the fossilized remains of croissants and cigarettes. You watch a man shout at a baguette for being too linear. You're not sure he's wrong. A woman walks by trailing lace and desperation, muttering verses from Baudelaire and shaking like a chandelier in an earthquake. Nobody listens. Everyone is too busy trying not to come undone. At the park, a child cries because the carousel won't move. The carousel cries back. You last 20 minutes outdoors, maybe less. Your skin itches like it remembers something your brain can't process. You try to light a cigarette and drop it 3 times. A dog barks in the distance and you flinch like it accused you of something. You run back inside. The lock on your apartment door feels strangely heroic. You bolt it 3 times. You close the curtains. You unplug the clock. Time is dangerous today. You lie on the floor because the bed feels too ambitious. You stare at the ceiling and try to remember what day it is. You fail, but succeed in identifying the crack above the light fixture as the shape of a screaming face. You apologize for it. It does not forgive you. You consider praying, but aren't sure who's accepting calls. You settle for whispering apologies to no one in particular, just in case. Your mouth is dry. Water tastes like betrayal. The walls lean in a little. You lean back. Someone screams in the alley. The sound doesn't echo, but just stays. Hangs there like a portrait too bold to take down. You think about leaving, then realize you're not sure how your legs work anymore. You count your fingers to make sure they're all still yours. You get to 10 and feel like you've achieved something historic. The silence isn't just absence, it's a presence. It presses down on your ribs and lingers in the corners of the room like perfume from a lover who left too quickly. You remember the vial in your coat pocket, untouched. You do not touch it now. You think of the word discipline and laugh until your throat hurts. By nightfall, Paris starts to shudder. Lights flicker. Radios whine. You hear music, but it sounds like it's being played underwater by someone who forgot what music is. A man walks by your window, sobbing into a violin. He's not playing it, just holding it. The streetlights blink in Morse code you're too tired to decipher. You close your eyes and try to recall the sensation of being sober, not the concept, the feeling, the texture of it. Your memory offers nothing. You don't sleep. You just wait for something to end or begin. Eventually, the sky lightens. The mirror is still broken. The city is still trembling. But a bird sings off key, defiant. You listen, not because it's beautiful, but because it's alive. You breathe. It takes effort, but it happens. The doctor is not old, but he wears fatigue like it's tailored. His office smells like antiseptic and secrets. You sit across from him as he scribbles into a leather-bound journal, the ink jerking across the page like it's dodging shame. The light is too bright for comfort, too dim for truth. He doesn't offer you tea. "I have cured everyone but myself," he says almost casually, like it's a weather report or a toast gone wrong. You glance at the trembling in his fingers. They twitch as if trying to flee the rest of him, delicate and deliberate, like they know they've betrayed the Hippocratic oath and are now hiding from consequence. He tries to cap his pen and misses. Tries again, misses again. The cap rolls off the desk and neither of you moves to retrieve it. It doesn't seem like the kind of day where caps get recovered. He leans back, his chair sighing under the weight of both of you. His smile is the kind you see at funerals, polite, overcorrected, and entirely misplaced. He laughs, small and dry. "At least my handwriting is still steady." It isn't. You steal a glance at the journal on his desk. The last line trails off like it got distracted or scared. The words above it are splotched and desperate, a mess of curves and chaos. You can't tell if it's written in French or confession. He used to be known as this man. Patients lined up outside his clinic, grateful for his quiet hands and quieter prescriptions. He was one of the first in Paris to embrace heroin as medicine. Pain, anxiety, war, trauma, all neatly bottled and labeled with dosages that sounded like absolution. He wasn't reckless. He was hopeful. That's what they always say, isn't it? Now the plants in his window box are dying in synchronized sorrow. His diplomas hang crooked, as if even the walls are reconsidering their endorsement. A bottle of heroin elixir sits uncapped on the shelf behind him, flanked by a stethoscope and a half-empty glass of something more honest. You wonder if the label has changed since the first batch, if it ever said caution. He tells you about the Baroness who used to weep in his office, her grief dissolving in sweet almond syrup. The jazz pianist who played again for the first time after his dose. The school teacher who whispered, "You've given me back my breath." He tells you these stories like they were victories. Then he tells you how they stopped coming, how one by one they vanished, or worse, stayed. Stayed in apartments that stank of spoiled milk and unopened mail. Stayed in cafés blinking at nothing. Stayed under bridges, their breath fogging like ghosts rehearsing their exits. You ask if he ever tried to stop. He doesn't answer, just runs his hand over his jaw like he's trying to erase it. There's a needle mark at the crook of his elbow, faint but insistent. Another on his wrist. You don't ask how many more. "I thought I could balance it," he says finally, voice with too many midnights. "A little for the pain, a little for the clarity, a little to remind me why I started." He shrugs. Turns out the line between physician and patient is thinner than you'd think, almost poetic. Outside, someone shouts about a lost dog or a stolen bicycle. Inside, the air doesn't move. His hands settle briefly, then resume their trembling. You want to say something, but nothing you have sounds useful. He looks at you with eyes that have seen too many last breaths. "The city's sick," he murmurs, "and we prescribe the sickness." You don't disagree. He reaches for his journal again. You can tell he's about to write something he'll pretend is important, but the pen just scratches paper like it's chasing meaning that won't come. You leave him there in a room full of medicine, and none of it is helpful. The door closes softly behind you. The hallway smells like bleach and endings. You step into the afternoon, unsure if you feel lighter or just further away. The doctor does not follow. He writes or tries to. The salons don't stop, they just slow, like a gramophone winding down mid-waltz. You arrive to find a gathering in what was once a ballroom and now resembles a hospice with better lighting. No one is dancing. Someone is sipping champagne like they're afraid it might fight back. The wallpaper is peeling in a dignified manner, like even the decor has decided to retire early. A countess nods off in a velvet chair, her tiara tilted at a tragic angle. No one fixes it. Across the room, a duke blinks slowly at a crystal decanter, as if waiting for it to explain something to him. It doesn't. A Viscount stands by the fireplace with a syringe cap still clutched between his fingers, head bowed in what might be reverence or a nap. You can't tell anymore. The air smells faintly of perfume, dust, and something medicinal trying to be discreet. A butler glides past, holding a silver tray with a single glass of water on it. You're not sure who he's serving. You're not sure he knows either. Somewhere in the distance, a violin scrapes out a version of Vivaldi's Winter that feels more like a threat. The player is hidden behind a curtain, as if ashamed or undead. You make your way through clusters of nobles discussing their symptoms like stock prices. One woman mentions she hasn't cried in weeks. Another confesses she hasn't blinked since Tuesday. Everyone laughs softly, the way one might laugh at a eulogy that uses the word quirky. There are fewer jokes now. Even the gossip feels damp. Have you seen the Baroness? Someone whispers, though they're sitting right next to her. The Baroness does not respond. Her eyes are open, but her presence has filed for resignation. You spot a Marquis trying to light a cigarette with the wrong end of a match. No one corrects him. Etiquette lives on, but only barely. A woman in a lavender gown hums to herself and then stops mid-note as though she suddenly remembered the futility of it all. Outside, Paris murmurs. Inside, the city's chosen few slowly fold into themselves like poorly written poems. You sit beside a count with trembling hands. He tells you he once rode a horse across the Pyrenees with nothing but a pistol and a flask of cognac. Now he has trouble navigating doorways. His wife left him 2 months ago, or maybe yesterday. Time is currently experiencing technical difficulties. A maid dusts a vase that hasn't held flowers since the season when people still used clocks. She hums a lullaby with no words. The dust seems to settle out of respect. You accept a drink. It tastes like surrender and citrus. A gentleman in tails leans in to tell you a secret, but forgets halfway through. He smiles anyway, and you nod as if you understood. He seems grateful. Later, someone opens a window and the entire room flinches. Daylight pours in, uninvited. It highlights the jaundiced wallpaper, the smudged mirrors, the heroin vials resting elegantly among the hoards. Someone pulls the curtains shut again. Paris should never be seen too clearly. As the evening lurches forward, you watch a young noblewoman sway in place with a serenity that borders on lifelessness. She murmurs that she's never felt more at peace. You believe her. Then she sits down and does not move again for the rest of the night. When you leave, the violin is still playing, or maybe it's a recording. Maybe it always was. You step outside into a city that exhales with you. The streets are damp with fog and leftover dreams. You glance back at the windows. Some are lit, most are not. Inside, the aristocracy is asleep. Some of them are even standing. The newspaper boy has lost his voice from yelling. You know this because he no longer yells headlines. He rasps them like the final gasps of a scandal. Crisis in Paris. He wheezes, waving a folded sheet that smells like panic and last week's wine. You take a copy. The ink comes off on your fingers like guilt. The headlines are suddenly moral. Columns that once lauded modern remedies now wail about moral collapse. A socialite who praised the heroin in her salon column last spring now pens op-eds warning of a city in decay. Her signature perfume ad still runs beneath her new sermon. It's called Midnight Salvation. Police storm the pharmacies with such theatrical zeal, you'd think they were raiding temples of ancient evil. They confiscate vials, smash glass, and shake their heads solemnly for the photographers. The same officers return at night, knocking softly and handing over francs like sins. One tips his hat, pockets a tiny bottle labeled for sleep, and whispers, "Bless you, doctor." You pass a shuttered apothecary with its windows broken and a sign reading "Closed for reflection." Behind it, the shelves remain fully stocked, just rearranged to look less organized, less suspicious, more chaotic in a believable way. Medicine now masquerades as clutter. On the front page of Le Pet Journal, a cartoon shows the Eiffel Tower slumped over like it's dozing off, a syringe tucked under one arm. You laugh too loudly at that one and immediately stop. The woman beside you is crying into her gloves, though whether from the cartoon or something older, you're not sure. You overhear a journalist at Lomagos saying he's written 3 pieces this week. One on addiction, one on hypocrisy, and one on what it means to be French in a time of scandal. He calls it a trilogy. His cigarette trembles with purpose. At the police station, officers compare notes on which journalists are likely to ask hard questions and which ones prefer bribes. You hear one mutter, "Just tell them it's spiritual." Another replies, "Or scientific, that still works on Thursdays." Somewhere a pharmacist is arrested mid-sale. His customers scatter like pigeons disturbed mid-prayer. He smiles as he's led away, nodding to a nun in the crowd who discreetly pockets the dropped syringe. You walk past a perfume factory with windows fogged in secrecy. Inside, women and smokers fill crystal bottles labeled No 7 Loris and cough elixir. They hum softly, never meeting each other's eyes. The foreman wears a suit and carries no scent. He doesn't need to. He reeks of money. An editorial in Le Figaro asks, "Where is God in all this?" A handwritten note in the margin reads, "In the basement of Rue Fontaine, selling dreams for 10 francs a vial." You pass 3 raids in one morning. They all look rehearsed. Cameras click before the battering ram swings. The pharmacist ducks a second too early. Someone drops a bottle on cue. The explosion of glass is poetic, almost patriotic. The mayor holds a press conference. He declares that the crisis is under control, that Paris remains strong, and that addiction is a personal failing, not a societal one. Behind him, his aide dabs his forehead with a cloth scented faintly with morphine and denial. The streets are tense now. Everyone looks like they're pretending to be sober or sane or concerned. You ask a woman at the bakery if she's heard about the crackdown. She hands you a croissant and a wink, then slides a sachet across the counter like it's sugar. The hypocrisy is thick enough to spread on toast. You do. In the evening, you see a man burn his medical license in the square. He plays the violin as it turns to ash. No one claps, but several people weep with admiration or withdrawal. The line is getting harder to see. A headline the next day reads, "Victory over Vice." The article describes a triumphant bust at a luxury salon, complete with quotes from a constable who swears the city has turned a corner. You recognize him from a party last week. He was asleep in the fountain. By week's end, the raid's slow, the headlines soften. Someone calls it a return to normalcy. The pharmacies reopen discreetly. The perfume factories hum like lullabibis. Paris exhales but keeps one hand behind its back. You keep the newspaper folded in your coat. The ink still smudges. The lie still shines. You find the notice taped to the pharmacy door like a breakup letter, effective immediately. Bayer discontinues the production of heroin. No explanation, no apology, just a neatly typed sentence under the company's seal as if to say it's not you, it's capitalism. The shop windows that once glowed with promise are now empty, dusty, reflective. You see yourself in the glass, paler, thinner, strangely sober. For a moment, you think you're a stranger. For a moment, you miss the days when you didn't care. Inside, the pharmacist organizes bottles that no longer matter. He moves cough syrup too. In the front, like anyone will be fooled. You ask, "What's next?" He shrugs and offers you aspirin with the wariness of a man who's seen dreams traded for hangovers. Outside, the city adjusts badly. A woman on the metro screams at no one, insisting someone's stolen her future. No one looks up. A man with trembling hands tries to trade a broken fountain pen for one last vial that no longer exists. You almost give him yours, then remember you don't have one either. The cafés now serve more coffee than ever, and none of it works. It only magnifies the ache, the withdrawal, the longing, the dull throb behind the eyes that no longer has a name. Poets try to switch back to basin, but the green fairy feels too innocent now, too silly, like a bedtime story after a war. At Lumago, a painter throws his canvas in the street and declares himself a landscape. No one argues. You sip bitter espresso and wonder if the sky was always this loud. The city has the air of someone trying to remember a beautiful lie. The musicians slow down. The dancers sit still. The laughter sounds hesitant like it's waiting for permission. The Seine no longer sparkles. It sulks. It slouches past Notre Dame like it's mourning something private. You hear stories. A pharmacist arrested for hoarding. A doctor caught watering down morphine with sugar water. A woman fainting in a perfume boutique when offered rose oil instead of Nob 7. Someone swears there's a black market dealer in Montmartre selling liquid nostalgia by the teaspoon, but when you go, it's just wine and disappointment. You attend a gathering in a once famous salon. The Countess is there, but her hair is unbrushed. The photograph plays in silence. No one dances. Someone reads poetry aloud and everyone listens too carefully. It's terrifying. A former addict stands and says he feels free. No one claps. You walk home through streets that feel heavier. The moon looks judgmental. You miss the part of yourself that didn't care what the moon thought. In the morning, the church bells ring again on time. It feels unnatural. You remember Father Duval and wonder if he still gives communion with a dropper. You wonder if he's still alive. You wonder how many people were just improvising priesthoods and prescriptions this whole time. The newspapers now print the end of an era in elegant serif fonts. One calls it the death of the miracle. Another calls it the rebirth of reason. You call it silence. You call it Paris without padding. You pass a glassblower stall. He's making perfume vials again, but slower, more careful. He tells you demand is down, but truth is up. You don't know if he's mocking you or mourning. The bankers have stopped smiling so much. A poet asks you to describe what it felt like. You try, but the words aren't made anymore. They were melted down and sold in vials that vanished with the miracle. You shrug and say it was like breathing backwards. He nods like that makes perfect sense. In your apartment, you stare at the ceiling for hours. You don't cry. You don't sleep. You don't move. You just listen to the air, trying to remember how to feel like air again. Outside, Paris carries on. It always does. But now it walks with a limp. The sun hits differently now. It used to crawl through Montmartre like it was late for something, slipping over chimneys and ducking behind steeples like a shy lover. Now it strides in boldly, unapologetic, casting gold onto shuttered windows and waking pigeons with intent. The sky is impossibly blue. You squint at it like it's showing off. The air tastes like air again. Not perfume, not ether, not the soft tang of denial that clung to street corners like an overplayed melody. Just wine and bread and faint laundry. You pass a baker dusting flour from his sleeves, smiling like a man reunited with purpose. His dough rises now, obedient and hopeful. You nod to him. He hums back. The cobblestones no longer echo with hurried footsteps chasing nothing. They click with measured strides. People walk because they have somewhere to go, not because they're trying to outrun themselves. A dog barks at its reflection in a shop window and doesn't apologize. You take that as a sign of progress. The cafe chairs are full again, but the eyes are clearer. The cups clink like they mean it. A young woman scribbles in a journal, pausing only to sip her coffee and frown at the page. You watch her cross something out, then write it again slower, like she's learning language from scratch. You understand the jazz is still there, but it's different now. No longer dipped in syrup or drowning in smoke. It kills, it loops, it laughs. A trumpet solo sounds like it's flirting with the morning rather than trying to seduce the void. You tap your foot, it taps back. A painter sets up his easel beside the carousel, not a tortured genius this time, just a man in a smudged beret with a canvas and a good view. He paints the sunlight. It's not ironic. No one mocks him. A little girl throws a croissant crumb at a pigeon and giggles when it misses. You remember that sound? The apothecary on Rupigal still exists. The sign now reads, lavender, aspirin, and advice. The man behind the counter looks older, like he's aged a decade in sleep. He sells you peppermint lozenas and asks how you've been, you say. Breathing, and he nods solemnly like it's a diagnosis. There are still ghosts, but they're quiet now, polite. They no longer barge into your thoughts mid-con conversation or haunt the bottom of your wine glass. They linger, respectful, like they're just passing through. You see one standing in line at the post office, waiting his turn. A cafe cat, the same one who used to judge you from the radiator, blinks slowly at you from a sunny stoop. For once, it doesn't look disappointed, just sleepy. You take that as forgiveness. You pass the building where the salons used to swell with poetry and needlepoints. It's a bookstore now, second-hand, the kind that smells like paper and patience. You walk in and run your fingers along the spines. Someone's underlining something in the corner. Eyes wide, hopeful. They've just discovered metaphor. The streets hum differently. Not the electric buzz of fevered hunger, but the soft murmur of a city waking up and stretching. Paris didn't die. It just sobered up, exhaled, and chose to keep living. It still limps sometimes. It forgets the words occasionally, but it's upright, breathing, trying. You stand at the top of the hill and look out over the rooftops. The chimneys smoke again, not with secrets, just firewood. Laundry flaps like flags of minor victories. You remember how to name the colors: ochre, cream, slate. You inhale. The world doesn't tilt, it stays. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you don't want to be anywhere else.